of these ideas I've been throwing out, just to make something very, 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 very clear. Um, I approach these conversations as white, male, straight, heterosexual, married, doctor, guy. And I say that specifically because I know that there's a tremendous number of vulnerabilities that I don't have to deal with or worry about or be concerned about in the context of how people might treat me, how people might think about me, all the assumptions that generally don't support anybody who's not a part of the dominant group support me. And I get the long hair and the earrings, blah, blah, blah. However, I can very easily pass, and I often do. I fly completely under the radar of any kind of subjugation or colonization or um, oppression, and so that's one of the reasons why I'm so committed to these conversations, because I believe that I have the opportunity to do things that other people wouldn't, because of assumptions that would be made by them that will not be made by me. The assumptions that are made by me are generally not that important anyway, and they certainly don't affect me in the ways that assumptions can affect people. And so, having said that, also throwing out this notion that there are folks who for whatever reason, it does not make sense to have these kinds of conversations with certain people, because for whatever position that they're in, it could be bad and disturbing and destructive for people who want to genuinely enter into a conversation from a position of curiosity. And so I said this before, I just want to say it again really clearly. If you're in a position where somebody's genuinely interested in having a conversation with you, and they're curious about differences in your thinking and differences in your perspective, regardless of what your perspective is, somebody who's open and actually interested in hearing what you have to say, these conversations, these kind of questions that I've talked about can transform those conversations, because it moves us beyond sort of what we're taught in terms of what's possible in conversation, and into a different place. That is not to suggest that this is going to solve a problem where somebody is being in a way with you that you find abusive or disrespectful. Uh, that's these conversations aren't going to affect those necessarily. I'm happy to enter into those conversations with those folks, but again, I'm not in a position where there's a profound level of vulnerability that I do not experience because of this whole thing, and not this whole thing necessarily, but the whole doctor thing and the assumptions that are made about doctors, and authority that I'm given and power that I'm given for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And so there's a different position that I would enter these conversations with. Also, care and support and love that I experience in my all around me all the time. I mean, there's a million different reasons why I'm comfortable entering into these conversations when I would not suggest somebody else do. And so, and if anybody wants to have a more specific conversation with me about this, DM me, get in touch with me directly. I'm happy to talk more specifically about this in your specific conversation context, exactly what you're dealing with specifically, because this is general and global. It's just more specifically, I just want to put out there the idea that I'm not suggesting that these kinds of conversations and questions in a context where there's verbal or emotional abuse, or where there's disrespect, or where there's lack of interest or lack of openness, or lack of any kind of availability to anything that you have to say, because they're not magic. They're really cool and they do amazing things, but they do, you have to enter into it from a position of vulnerability. And I guess, I'm not suggesting that anybody put themselves in a position of vulnerability, especially in a context where they realize that it's already been bad. So that's what's next, Dr. Joel, for today, and hope everybody's having a great day. And I'll be back tomorrow with some